What does Batman, Superman, and Peter Parker
Pizza time.
all have in common, excluding the spandex superhero status and dead parents?
Pizza time.
They, like many other classic Western heroes, follow what is known as the One Rule, also known as the No Rule, but because YouTube's a negative Nelly, we can't use the word, so instead we'll stick to the game end or the One Rule. One rule is simple. Don't game end someone. And if you do game end someone, we'll have old Charles here revoke that hero license of yours lickety split.
Good evening, sir. I certainly hope you've got a license for
Moral ideology.
I don't know. In that case, in the name of
Justice.
Now the next thing you'll be saying is, Lachlan, the One Rule is all well and good, but have you seen like any modern superhero movie in like the last decade? To which I'll respond, of course. Does it look like I have a life? As the superhero genre, especially in the West, has grown more popular and more realistic and gritty to try to appeal to that popularity through the cynic in us all, it appears the ideals of the golden age of superheroism have been cast aside, either through roundabout ways, like the hero not technically game-ending someone, but totally letting the villain game-end themselves through a series of complicated contrivances. Or the heroes are more anti-heroes and grow a pair and actually the villain themselves. The most egregious example being, of course, Ben Affleck's Batman, very literally blowing people up, shooting them, and running them over with his car. Now, as objectively hilarious as that is, it's a bit concerning that as a society, we are expected to idolize these new versions of gritty heroes who have very much sacrificed the One Rule in order to appear more real. Now, to be fair, the One Rule is a bit of a luxury and has been heavily criticized in of itself. Superman can maintain the rule to an extent because he's literally a god, and honestly, it would be more of a minor inconvenience for him not to snap someone's neck with his pinky finger. Batman has been heavily criticized for not game-ending the Joker under multiple instances because, to be frank, in his newer iterations, the Joker is objectively a sociopathic terrorist who's game-ended at least a Gotham City's worth of people, including Batman's own psychic Jason Todd. The One Rule is a luxury that any show with a godlike character can kind of afford to indulge in, but the moment the writing gets tough to justify that ideology, frankly, people drop it. And that's not just Western superheroes. Eastern anime, probably the biggest competitor of Western superheroes, are very kill-happy. Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, if Naruto ever actually finished the job. The only anime I can legitimately think of at the moment that's even remotely gritty where the main hero doesn't flat out attempt to kill the villain every battle is One Piece, and that's only because Oda has abandonment issues with his own characters. Now, what the hell does this have to do with Vash the Stampede? Everything. Trigun is unique. Vash the Stampede is unique, and I'm not going to call him the Humanoid Typhoon and you can't make me because frankly Vash the Stampede is way cooler. But Vash and Trigun's anime story, manga fans, I'm terribly sorry, I'll get to that at some point, is a powerful dissection of the One Rule as an ideology, as a luxury, as a choice, in a world where that One Rule is near impossible to maintain. Generally, the beginning of the Trigun anime is pretty lighthearted. Vash is good at what he does. He's a gunman for hire, and he just about outclasses every single person he meets by a mile. And therefore, anytime violence crops up around him, you know that everyone is gonna get saved, whether they like it or not. Because Vash is morally against killing. Not just for him, but for anybody else. And not just in the convenient sense of also, they can let the villain game end themselves. He can and will do everything in his power to save a life, no matter how crooked, no matter how terrible, no matter what they've done. And this, dear viewer, is where the video stops being comedic. Sorry, Stella, here's to less editing for you, I guess. Oh, and spoiler alerts for all you anime watchers out there, but this is kind of necessity because we're going to talk about, probably, one of the most poignant deaths in anime history. Despite his designation as an active god and actually being an alien plant creature that can live hundreds of years without aging, Vash is not Superman. He's not Batman or Spider-Man. He's not a god or an incredibly lucky individual who can somehow, at the end of every single day, come out all right. Vash is a very human protagonist, one of the most human protagonists you'll see. He's not some upstart shonen fella, he knows the stakes of his failures, and he is not some all-powerful entity who can just make them happy. He's just good enough to get by on his own philosophy. And at first, there's nothing wrong with that, because for the first few episodes of Trigun, Vash is unequivocally able to beat that ideology even in the gritty desert world. He has the luxury of being able to save everyone. Until his past catches up with him, and he starts to be targeted by villains that he can't just disarm and be done with. Villains who will purposefully kill and torture innocent people just to emotionally hurt Vash. These villains are more than willing to game end themselves, and almost none of them can be reasoned with. And the very first one to attack Vash massacres an entire town to do so. And let's be absolutely clear, in that episode, Vash has multiple opportunities to game end this man. At the beginning of the fight, before people died, during the fight as people were dying, and after the fight as the corpses of men, women, and children litter the ground. And yet, he still refuses to kill him, even with a gun pressed against his face. And this doesn't get easier. Vash's wins become fewer and far between. The people around him, people he's known all of his life, people who are now his greatest friends, are put in danger and die, because no matter what, he will not kill. And you might ask, why would Vash take such a hardline stance? Well, it's because the mother figure in his life instilled in him a belief that all life is valuable and that no one has a right to take it. And on a conjoined note, with that mother figure being dead, Vash fears that if he does break that rule that he believes so heavily in, he will lose that tenuous connection with her. Now, to be fair, he does believe in this ideology wholeheartedly, even without Rem save Rem, but it doesn't really matter to the people left in the wake of those hunting him. And so now we come to the title of this video. Is Vash the Stampede a coward? Is his choice to follow his one rule without having the guarantee that everything will turn all right make him responsible for the hundreds of deaths in his wake? And after thinking about it for a while, I think the answer is in part yes. Vash is a coward. He's afraid of what it means to take a life. He's afraid of what it will do to him and what it might do to that person. He could have saved, objectively, many more people if even just a few times he pulled that trigger. But while Vash might be a coward, his ideology is an incredibly brave one. The choices he makes to follow the one rule are painful and brutal, and the repercussions of which tear him apart. Make no mistake, just because he's a coward doesn't mean he's taking the easy route. Vash suffers for his ideal present, and he doesn't blame his failures on others. He simply believes so heavily in the sanctity of life that he will not take it. It's not his right to choose. And maybe that's cowardly, idiotic, foolish, but he's not inherently wrong for believing that it's no one's right to take the life of another human being. In an ideal world, Vash would be a Superman. Trigun is powerful because it shows us the consequences and the pain of that ideal without ever giving us the gratification of whether or not that ideal is the right one, as exemplified in one Nicholas D. Wolfwood. Wolfwood is introduced into the series as a sort of rival to Vash, an expert gunslinging priest who Vash has to keep reminding comedically, "Thou shalt not kill." And it's funny at first, a cool anti-hero for Vash to bounce his eccentric ideology off, until Wolfwood does kill. And these deaths are not some triumphant victory. They're often revenge killings of men who have already committed atrocities, or preemptive shootings to prevent further violence. And in a purely logical, emotionless analysis, these killings that Wolfwood partakes in are effective. It neutralizes the bad guy, prevents them from either hurting more people or ever hurting someone in the first place. So why does it hurt Wolfwood the most? So much so that after having a falling out with Vash over shooting a child, Wolfwood has a crisis of conscience and decides for the first time without Vash to spare the life of another. And in that moment, it feels really good to save a life instead of taking it. And the horrible thing, and so painful in Trigun, is that the person that Wolfwood saves ends up mortally wounding the man just seconds later. Wolfwood, who has survived for so long on selfishness and death, is killed by his last act of kindness. It's not fair. But instead of hating Vash and his ideals and how stupid it was for him not to have just shot the man, he goes to a church, stumbling, bloodied, and dying, and admits that in that moment, he's regretful because he can now see the ways throughout his entire life that he could have saved more people. That it's almost comically easy how many more people he could have saved. And he can see that vision of Eden, that ideal world that this philosophy can create, and that he'll never reach. Wolfwood's life flashes before his eyes, and he's brought to tears as he asks God if he was wrong all this time. And the priest's never given an answer. This one rule, this fantasy that Trigun proposes, the hardships that come from it, that's what makes this show so powerful. That's what makes Vash the bravest coward of them all. We watch and wonder each episode if it's truly worth it not to just kill these evil people because, and I'll be honest, if Vash killed a few more of them, Wolfwood would be alive and many more would still be alive. And on some level, I think Vash understands that too. Because why else would he cry so often? The only time Vash directly kills someone is when he is absolutely forced to, when he can't come up with another way to save the people he loves and the innocent people around him. And after he's pulled the trigger, that decision is not glossed over. He's emotionally broken for many days. The decision haunts him. But unlike Batman, unlike Superman, unlike the slippery slope fallacy, breaking his ideal does not open the floodgate for Vash. He doesn't turn evil or give up on the ideal. He's reaffirmed through the small victories of his life that maybe that perfect world he fights for can still exist. That near impossibility still exists so long as he believes in it. Trigun hits so hard because it commits wholeheartedly through thick and thin to this ideal. It does not compromise, it does not falter, it does not abandon the rule, or lie about how hard it is to obtain. The more realistic the world, the harder it is to maintain your ideals, but that doesn't mean they are worthless or stupid or a luxury. They exist so long as people are willing to fight for them, weather hardships for them, and maybe at the end of the day, those ideals won't bring you any happiness at all. But that does not make them any less powerful. Trigun is a classic for a reason, and I hope that with its gorgeous animations and ambitious retelling, Trigun Stampede can do its predecessor justice and uphold its ideals. But that's the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, please consider at the least liking or maybe commenting. That really helps the algorithm. And if you really enjoyed this video, and if you perhaps like me, then please consider subscribing. I'm planning on putting out some more anime stuff as I keep going, and we've got lovely streams for you to come watch too. So thank you so much for sticking around till this end. My name is Lachlan Star Eyes, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.